having had that bracing description of the challenge that we're facing, both economically and strategically from China, I think it's a perfect send-up for our next speaker. He is Shali Kumar, who has a distinguished record of accomplishment in the business space, including now as the chairman, as I understand it, of AVG Technologies, Advanced Technologies. Have I got that right? He is also a man who served as the chairman of the Indian Advisory Board for the Trump campaign and has been involved with the Asian Pacific American Advisory Committee to the Trump-Pence administration. So it's delightful to have him with us to talk a bit about what the Chinese have been doing to attack and take down America's manufacturing base. Mr. Kumar, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
10 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. We're going to make a PowerPoint presentation with a beautiful LED wall, but most of these walls get made in China, so they found out that I was going to do that. So somehow it's not here, but we made another provision, so you guys have a presentation. We printed them out, so we'll follow along with that. Let there be no doubt that China has waged an unrestricted war on American manufacturing for the last 30 years. It has been strategic, long-term, sustained, and beautifully executed from China's perspective, taking full advantage of American democratic institutions. The bad news is they have won. If 85% of what we give to each other at Christmas is manufactured in China, and American military has a hard time finding tool makers in the United States, I would say they probably have won. But the good news is that we have a different president. President Trump has arrived, who recognizes this threat and has reversed the course. So we are in a different direction now, but there's a lot more that has to be done to reverse the course. Now, somebody here mentioned that China is not expansionist. I'd like you to turn to a presentation on my second page, 1959, 1962, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. What that means Hindi Chini. This was a phrase coined by then Premier of China, Zhou Enlai. This was when I was 13 years old. Always interested in history, so I had just finished reading The Rise and Fall of Third Reich by William Shirer, and we were celebrating what was going to happen between India and China, a punch shield, 5 principles of coexistence. And then, lo and behold, what happens? The Pearl Harbor moment of India, 1962, October 1962, when just total surprise, 100,000 troops of Chinese troops marched into India. And where again one gentleman said that they don't have desire or they're not expansionist, they took 150,000 square miles of Indian territory and still hold it. So Chinese threat is real, and we should not forget that particular episode either. Now, next slide I have is importance of industrial base in war. I take you to a quote from Admiral Yamamoto, the reluctant warrior as he has been described, architect of Pearl Harbor. He says, anyone who has seen the auto factories in Detroit and the oil fields in Texas knows that Japan lacks the national power for a naval race with America. Its industrial base makes America invincible. So what does the Chinese do? When they have this long-term plan to essentially be the sole superpower in the world, so how are we going to go do that? The first thing they want to do is capture that industrial base. So next slide, you look at it, you see the tale from 1987 to 2014. This was Guangzhou in 1987. You see on the left? Bicycles, dark, black, and today's, or actually not today's, 2014. This is a picture of Guangzhou in 2014. And if you look at parallelly the same thing, what happened in 1987 in what was Elk Village. I'm from Chicago. Elk Village was a beautiful village. It was the most prosperous county in manufacturing at that time. Every block had 8 factories. Today, or 2014, that same Elk Village hardly has any businesses. 1 out of 10 factories is open. So China is the manufacturing capital of the world. They make 85% of air conditioners, 70% of all mobile phones, 80% of all devices in the world. And we export, or China exports, close to $2.8 trillion a year worldwide. Out of that, $550 billion is to the United States. That increases by 10% per year. Chinese exports to the United States include something like $160 billion a year in electronics. And I speak about electronics because that's my field. I'm an electronics guy. So the next slide, what you see is how did China do it? They made a plan in 1995 to increase exports to U.S. from 45 billion to 450 billion in 20 years. To build subsidized Western standard manufacturing plants, provide subsidized lodging, transportation, and training, set up quality standards acceptable to U.S. customers, organized major trade fairs to bring U.S. and Western customers to visit China and see the products and the factories. Initially, even paid for trips. They hired American sales force to convince major Wall Street companies to set up shop in China. Targeted American manufacturing one by one. I'll give you a very simple idea here. If China tomorrow decides they want to make Boeing bankrupt, they could target Boeing in 10 years, they could make Boeing go bankrupt. They target industry by industry. And I've been up and close in that whole phenomenon. So in electronics, what they are manufacturing and shipping to the United States, computers, telephones, LCDs, monitors, ICs, videos, products, just about everything electronic you can think of. We heard a lot about 5G today. Okay, so in 5G, the one protection is that if we bring all the semiconductor manufacturing back to the United States, we'll control it. But that's not the case right now. In terms of tariffs, the president has started the right process, but I take you to the last slide, case for bringing manufacturing back to U.S. by proper selection of HS codes in applying China tariffs. So, is everybody on this page? What we are doing is in applying tariffs, we are making a mistake. Maybe I'll just give you this example. We import laptops and these type of devices, close to 50 billion of these, or $50 billion worth of these products. In applying tariffs, what we are doing is we are exempting these finished goods products from tariffs, but putting tariffs on keyboards, displays, motherboards, to essentially prevent American manufacturers to compete with China. We're kind of on the wrong track. That has to be corrected. The finished goods are the ones that need to be tariffed and not the components. There will be time where you could actually tariff when we get into motherboards, but the motherboards require a much bigger capital investment, almost $20 billion. But if you put a tariff on this part number, you could create 500,000 jobs within a matter of 2 years. So, in short, China is a real threat, and it can be countered, but it cannot be countered by simple measures, taken instantaneously. You have to have a long-term plan. Can the United States become the manufacturing center of the world, capital of the world? You could do that in 10 years to 20 years if you have a sustained policy. This trade deal of just should we have tariffs or not have the tariffs on that itself is not going to do it. You have to have a very similar plan like China executed, how to kill industry by industry by industry. And we have to do the same thing, save industry by industry by industry. For example, printed circuit boards, one industry, plastic parts, another industry. You go industry by industry, and then you have to save those industries and bring them back. Thank you.
Mr. Kumar, thank you very much. Very important. Would you take a question?
Yes, please.
One question, please. Anybody? Yes, sir. Identify yourself, please.
Yes, hi, John Mills, retired Department of Defense here, and
member of the Committee on the Present Danger of China.
Oh, thank you, Frank. So yeah, the targeted tariffs I think are very interesting, and kind of a rolling, temporary targeted tariffs. Tariffs long term have some bad unintended consequences. Take the Jones Act, for example, which is essentially one. So I think if we target a list of companies, Huawei this week, somebody next week, I have very specific companies in mind here, but we need a rolling wave of them to, and I would also call it an IP theft recoupment tax, and to shock their forward momentum and give us time to regroup and recapitalize on these areas. Your thoughts?
My thought in this will be, because I'm really a manufacturer. I'm considered to be one of the topmost manufacturing experts in the world. And you got to take industry by industry, not company by company. Printed circuit boards. I'll just give you an example. PC boards, printed circuit boards that go into any electronic product. In 1998, the whole industry was 10 billion a year. China decides, okay, let's kill it. Today that is 50 million. From 50 billion from 10 billion to 50 million in 10 years. They accomplished it in 10 years. Very strategic plan. They pick the target, they pick the industry, and they say, okay, all the major companies filed bankruptcy. And then you know what they did? And American courts, in a way, helped that also. But that's why I had said institutions, democratic institutions. What they did is they bankrupted the entire industry, all the major players that had a capital equipment overall of something close to $15 billion. You know how much they paid for it? Because they had to all auction. So all the equipment moved back to China because they paid something like a penny on the dollar. So they target industry by industry by industry. And that's how, and it cannot be done just on a tariff for 2 months, or tariff for 6 months, or tariff for 1 year. Because American entrepreneurs and companies will not invest if it was not long term. You could phase, let's say initially for PC boards, it could be 25% initially, could be phased 20%, 15% as it recovers, but it has to be long term. Thank you.
Sir.